Hi, everyone. As you know, many of us are at home right now. We are not going to work. Some of us have the privilege of working from home. My studio where I was working actually closed. I've been taking this time to really reflect on everything. And in reflecting on everything, I've been reviewing some of my writing, and I wanted to share a piece that I wrote in 2018, and this piece is called Someplace in Between. And in that time, I'll give you a little preface. In that time, I was really feeling like someone who is in between in many ways in my life, in many parts of my life. So I think that it's amazing that the universe always brings things into your life when it's time. It always brings things to revisit in your life when it's time. And I think that this article is totally reflective of what's going on right now, you know? So join me. I'm going to read this article to you. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that it inspires you. It's called Someplace in Between. It's something new I wanted to share. I wrote it in 2018. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to just find it. Okay. So, someplace in between. The food that we eat, the wine that we consume, and the air that we breathe has consequences. Everything in life has a consequence. A reaction has an effect. When I was 27 years old, I was overweight, unhappy, dissatisfied with my relationship, and stuck. I was stuck in the sense that I wasn't living fully. I wasn't truly living my life for myself, but for the validation and for the approval of other people. My parents, my friends, my partner, my coworkers, and my family. It was 2012, and I was a New York City public school teacher. It was the right thing for me to do. After all, I was a product of the New York City public school system who had gone on to Wellesley College and Brown University. I was a woman of color, and far too many of the teachers in the public school system were teaching brown and black children, but not as they would their own, but as others, because they themselves had no understanding of what it was like to be a person of color. I remember when it happened. It was fall of my junior year, a beautiful breezy day at Wellesley College, and as I was leaving class, my professor stopped me to chat and asked me what I was doing after Wellesley. I remember being somewhat puzzled, like, I'm just trying to figure out how to get through this semester. In my head, of course. But it struck me because I hadn't really thought about it. This was it. This was the point that I was expected to get to, the degree that I was expected to achieve. So after this, I hadn't picked my head up from indulging and trudging through my studies to even think about what was next. I am the child of a mother from Tuskegee, Alabama, and a father from Fairmont, North Carolina. My parents both made their ways to New York City for something else. My dad grew up with his grandparents, who were farmers and landowners, who were well known judges and undertakers. And as a young man of 14 years old, with only an eighth grade education, He yearned to meet his mother, and he boldly hitchhiked his way to New York City, starting out as a shoe shiner and working his way up to a successful entrepreneur. My mother came from a family of doctors, scientists, lawyers, and educators, all who had defied and survived the tight grip of Jim Crow laws and segregation. She came to New York in her late 20s to attend graduate school. She and my father met at a community organizers meeting, and here I am, a New York City kid, someplace in between an only child and the youngest of nine on my dad's side. Yes, yes. We all know how that goes. Not quite living in Harlem, not quite living in the Upper West Side either. I lived with my mother in the same apartment she had lived in as a graduate student. All of her roommates had moved out, and at the age of 42, my mother decided she was ready to have a child. She was well traveled, well educated, and still was friendly enough with my father. I actually have no idea what their relationship was like, but this is my theory. And so here I came. I knew I was different when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I didn't feel like the other girls. I remember looking in the mirror and imagining myself differently, wetting the top of my upper lip so that the little hairs I had would resemble a mustache, and feeling really cool about it, refusing to wear dresses because they made me feel really uncomfortable. In fact, my mom says that I told her I wanted to be able to run around like the boys. There was this singing group at the time when I was in elementary school called Jeanne, who used to wear their hair short, and I loved their music. And I asked my mom if I could wear my hair like them, and she said yes. So I went to the barber and I wore my hair short, and I felt good. I felt like myself. When I was going to the beach or to the pool, I was the kid who wanted to wear swim trunks. No one truly seemed to understand why, but they accommodated and let me. I don't even know if I understood why myself. I think it was more of an instinctual feeling, going with my gut and doing what feels comfortable as kids who haven't yet been inundated with society's ways often have the freedom to do, and I'm thankful for that. I remember being a huge fan of the rap group Criss Cross and wearing my hair like them and dressing like them. The first time my mom let me go to the movies with my friend by myself, I wore my favorite Criss Cross wannabe short sleeve hoodie and black pants. And as we were leaving the theater and heading to the restroom, I remember being chased and yelled at. "You can't go in there! You can't go in there, little boy!" And I slowly turned around, embarrassed and scared and horrified, to a tiny, red faced woman huffing and puffing, and politely, as my mother had raised me, said, "I'm not a boy. I'm a little girl." And she looked at me and looked again as if she couldn't understand. And finally, she walked away and left me in peace. When I was about 5 years old, I told my mom as we were eating dinner that I didn't want to be called Julia anymore. I wanted to be called Zune, a name that came to me, which was a collection of my favorite letters, Zoon. Ungendered or genderless in hindsight, just like me, just like I was. When I went through puberty, it seemed honestly as if I woke up one day in the summer and my whole life had changed. I went from a flat chested girl who was the tallest in my class and therefore was always at the back of the line. Remember size order lineups in elementary school? Awkward, as most of the boys were in the front and all of the girls were in the back. Not the best for everyone's self esteem. But anyway, I digress. I was a Girl Scout at the time and an avid West Side Little Leaguer. I played all the sports. This was a neighborhood Little League organized by parents on the Upper West Side. It was seasonal, and I played soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and softball in the spring. A blast for an only child like me, as much of my time was otherwise spent as a latchkey kid at home because my mom was an amazing, hardworking warrior woman. Yes. Out of nowhere during this time, my two little bumps turned into double D's. I kid you not. And my awkward, tall self, I was probably the same height as a sixth grader that I am now, was not only towering over the boys, but also I had boobs for days that were right at their eye level. Hugs were constantly asked for, and at the time, I couldn't figure out why. Girl, insert eye level, eye roll here. I remember the moment that my life changed before me and my womanhood came upon me like a torrential downpour on a sunny summer day. You know the feeling. You're walking along, it's a beautiful day, and then all of a sudden it gets really cloudy, a little breezy, and then the sky is just gray. And you think to yourself, hmm, should I go inside? Maybe it's gonna rain. No, maybe it's just passing through. Girl, by the time you've made up your mind, the rain has poured down, soaked through your clothes. The sun came back out again, like, hey y'all, I had to step out for lunch, but I'm back now. What's good? And you are wondering what just happened to your whole life. Yes, well, that is what puberty felt like for me. I was 11 years old. It was my first year of middle school, sixth grade, and I was getting ready for school. I was running around as usual, anxiety filled and a little bit behind schedule. I went to the bathroom, and as I'm wiping myself, I see brown. Yikes! First, I was kind of like, oh no, did I poop on myself? But I was wiping from the front, so no, it couldn't have been that. And in a panic, I called my mother, tears streaming down my face in terror at the terror between my legs. And she rushed to the bathroom to see what happened, what was the problem. And I showed her the evidence on the toilet paper. What's happening? I yelled in a dramatic middle schooler, adult body, kid maturity kind of way. And she looked at me and she smiled. And she said, Zuni, it's your period. That is when it all changed. No more swim trunks, no more shortcuts, girl time, all the way up. The Babysitters Club, Judy Bloom, and all that. Are you there, God? It's me, Julia. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was changing into society's expectation of me to be feminine, to wear tight fitting clothes that accentuated my curves, to wear my hair long and straight like only the stylist at the New York City Dominican hair salon can do. I dressed like this throughout high school, dated some guys, had a somewhat boyfriend to for a while, and was living the straight girl dream. Fake nails and all of that. But the makeup thing, not so much. I remember my mother checking my outfit before I would leave to school to make sure it wasn't too inappropriate. But honestly, I was a little too nerdy for that. I was the front of the class, honor student type in high school that spent her free periods in the library studying or completing my homework. I asked for extra credit and stayed after school to help my favorite teachers. That was me. That's what I poured myself into. As a little girl, riding in my father's car or sitting with my mother at dinner, my parents were not together at the time. The question, no, really more like the statement that was constant and always reverberating in the back of my mind was, when you go to college. Not, Julia, would you like to go to college after you graduate from high school? There was no option. The expectation was set. I appreciate it, and I also sometimes think about how differently my life would have been had it been a question and not an expectation. So, back to that moment at the beginning of this story where my professor at Wellesley in my junior year asked me what I wanted to do after I graduated from college. I had never thought that far. Graduating, being in college, getting into a successful, well known, bougie, parent approved school that was my family's expectation. I had fulfilled the when you go to college statement. But now what? Who was I? What did I want from life? No one had asked me that. I had never asked myself that. It was as if my whole life was flashing before my eyes to this point. Had I ever lifted my head up from my books, from doing what everyone else wanted me to do, to ask myself what I, 21-year-old Julia Curtis Burns, wanted to do? A voice inside of me, inside of my soul, whispered, "Girl, not even a little bit." So I did what any college graduate who had no idea what she wanted to do with her life and is privileged enough to have a fellowship that offered me money, yes, would do. I went to graduate school. I had two choices: to return to my roots and stay in New York City and attend Columbia University's Teachers College, or branch out and spread my wings to try my luck in a new city, Providence, and attend Brown University. Hmm, decisions, 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 decisions. At the time, I was 22 years old and yearning for the bit of independence that my college life had wonderfully granted me. So I said, "Brown University, girl, here I come." It was a 1 year master's degree program, and though I don't remember much about what I learned that year, let's be honest, I do remember learning a lot about myself. I was still in that in between coming out stage where I was out to some people, but not really open to the world, and not too comfortable with my sexuality and or my gender expression either. My longtime friend and I were working at a relationship, but I had absolutely no idea what being in a relationship was and genuinely actually meant. Nor was I ready for one because I didn't even know who I was. And as RuPaul says on Drag Race, if you can't love yourself, then how in the hell are you gonna love somebody else? Can I get an amen? Yes. As a result of my struggles, internalizing a lot of my fears about coming out, I started to feel really depressed in grad school. And I tried many things like going to the gym, but honestly, that was maybe just once or twice. Keep that real. Writing in my journal, which made me feel even more sad, and taking lessons from Carrie Bradshaw while I cried about my life watching Sex in the City. I know. I was on campus one day and I saw a poster up for a mental health slash therapy session. Apparently, every student was given one free session a semester. And I requested a woman for my therapy session. And as nervous as I was when I walked in for my first session, I was pleasantly surprised to be greeted by a black woman. Yes, queen! Through the blessing of the universe, she took me on as her one consistent student throughout the year. Every therapist had an option of taking on one student. I was so pleased that she took me in. The black community has much stigma around mental health and therapy, which I understand in terms of our history, of our bodies, our minds, medicine, and research. And I carried my own stigma around mental health. Like, am I having white people entitlement problems right now? Is Brown University affecting my sense of self? Am I just being dramatic? Maybe I just need a good, hard, ugly cry. You know the kind. Let me sit down. Let me breathe. Let me eat something. Let me reassess. Let me watch Coming to America and then see how I feel. But the truth was, I was depressed. Depression runs in my family. Self care doesn't. And why wouldn't it? There is a much beauty and weight in the essence of being a black person. We walk through the world in difference. We walk through the world with a double consciousness to be understood and embraced by each other, our community, our people, but also to be accepted and non threatening to white people. That means to prove oneself constantly because just as good is not good enough, and better is too intimidating. My therapist taught me to be kind to myself, to reflect, to appreciate, to learn, to listen, to love myself. And I was trying to still figure out who that self was. Towards the end of my program, I wrote my mom a letter while I was walking around town. I mean, Providence was cute and all, but it was a town, not a city. Let's keep it real. No shade to my Providence people, just saying. And I found this book called Letters from Parents of LGBT Youth, and I bought it for her. It was my olive branch, my way of making peace with her. I called her that weekend with this huge lump in my throat, and she asked me how I was doing, and she could sense that I was feeling pretty bad. I'm jumping on the bus and coming up there, she said, and she hung up the phone. My mom is an amazing woman. Though she may not understand everything about me, my mom has always been there for me, and I love her and respect her so much for that. I aspire to be like her when I grow up. I wrapped the book in brown paper and I wrote out all of my feelings that I had been going through in my multicolored journal. Still not sure if I should share my thoughts I had written down with my mother. And in the end, I promised myself I wouldn't let my fear get to me, and I ripped each page of the journal and I folded it up. In the letter I had written with my mom, my truth, then I knew I knew I had always been different, that I had struggled for a long time to accept myself, that I wanted her to accept me, that there wouldn't be a man, there would never be a man. We had sushi for dinner that night, and my stomach turned as I knew what was coming, what I had to do in a moment of fear and confidence. And I said, I have something for you. And I quickly placed the book that I had bought her and the letter on top of it. I then quickly excused myself and ran to the bathroom as I couldn't bear the thought of her literally reading my life in front of me. I don't even think I had to go to the bathroom. I just stood there, my heart racing through my chest. Would she accept me? Would she approve? It was always about pleasing her, pleasing others, seeking the approval of others, never about accepting myself. Wait, my dog. There she is. It was always about pleasing her. Okay. It was always about pleasing her, pleasing others, seeking the approval of others, never accepting myself. That had to change. When I came back to the table, having given her in my mind a sufficient amount of time to read the letter, I sat down and she smiled and she waved her hand jokingly, and she said, I love you for who you are. That was a relief. I exhaled like Whitney Houston said we should. I graduated from my master's degree program, thank the Lord, and I trucked it back to NYC. I started interviewing at public schools around the city and took the first job I was offered. Best move? In hindsight, not so much. But my parents said it was a tough job market, and it was a job. And it was a job. Now I realize it was also about happiness. It is also about finding your truth and a career path that aligns with it. I taught at that school for 2 years and learned a lot about saying no, about salary jobs, about making time for myself. But I was still not happy. I still did not approve of myself. I had to figure out who I was, what I wanted out of life, and what would make me happy. Would I ever be happy? Would I ever be satisfied? By the time I reached my third year of teaching, I had changed schools and started working in a middle school in the South Bronx. I gained weight and was over 200 pounds and heavily drinking. You know, teachers are the hold me downs of the happy hour, and I was the margarita queen, honey. Yes. I was having fun after work, but not acknowledging how I was really feeling, not listening to my body and how my actions affected it. I needed a change, a wake up call. Something was terribly wrong, whether I accepted it or not. On New Year's Eve of 2008, I had a crash emotionally, a wake up call. I woke up on January 1st, 2009, to my parents and friends hovering over me. I quickly jumped up and realized where I was. I quickly jumped up, not realizing where I was, but I felt fatigued. What's going on? I said. My parents didn't know about my life outside of my work or teaching. They didn't know that I drank a lot. I looked around in the fluorescently lit room, and suddenly I realized I was in a hospital. You passed out, Julia. I didn't know what to say or what to do, my friend said. I was so mad at her. Why would she tell my parents? But I understood. I raced with her to the bathroom to talk things through, and I realized as I pulled my amazingly tight jeans down that I had a diaper on. This was my low point. I couldn't drink away my problems. I had to face myself for who I was and stop hiding. I remember my heart and intuition tried to speak to me many times, but I hadn't listened to her. There is this one moment that is very clear. On my graduation day from Wellesley undergrad, I remember randomly stuffing my belongings from my dorm room into bags and then stuffing them into the car and leaving that day to unload all my randomly stuffed things that same day into my apartment in Providence. Where was my reflection time? What was I doing? Who was I trying to impress? Did I even want this? Who was I living life for? Was it for me or for someone else? What was my truth? What was my heart saying? And who was she? And who was I? Anyway, I had never thought about it. This was my chance. I look back on it now and I smile. I am now 31 at the time of writing this. Now I'm 34, nearly 3 years later. I am now 31 years old and living my life unashamed, carefree, and approval free. Of course, there are still those voices inside my head that try to dissuade me. You're crazy! That's never gonna work! How are you gonna make money? However, in moving on from teaching, because my health and my sanity was more important than money, starting my own business, losing 55 pounds, and now starting my own podcast, I am free. Fear can hold us back. Fear can shield us from our true gifts and unique talents. Explore who you are and embrace your evolution. It can feel like a struggle and be uncomfortable, but I think about how birds molt and shed all of their feathers to grow new, even more beautiful ones. How caterpillars wrap themselves and constrain themselves into a tightly knit and bound cocoon for months to break free into a butterfly. Metamorphosis is the essence of our existence. It is the beauty of growth. When I came out to my mother for the third time, right? I had to do it 3 times, and told her there wouldn't be a man or boyfriend or a husband, I released. I was in my truth. I set myself free. I didn't need to come out anymore. Ever since I was a little girl, I knew I was different. My style was different. However, all throughout high school, I had dressed the way I was socialized to dress as a young woman: tight jeans, skirts. I mean, don't get me wrong, I looked cute, but I said I looked damn good, girl, honey. But it just wasn't me. It wasn't how I felt inside. There's a Prince lyric. I love Prince so much. I'm not a woman. I'm not a man. I'm something you will never understand. And that's totally how I identify. I have both masculine and feminine energies, and I walk through life with them. I'm androgynous, and I enjoy pushing the boundaries of what people consider male and female. I'm often stared at, and people look at my face, and they look at my chest, and they look at my face, and then they look at my chest to place me in a box, to understand me in society's definition of woman and man. I simply am both, and I love it. The most wonderful, rewarding blessing and simultaneously challenging part of life is to be your true self, to be vulnerable, to be raw, and to be the essence of who you are. That is living. That is happiness. That is true love. And now I know what love is. Someplace in between. That's an article that I wrote about, I guess, almost 3 years ago now, in 2018. And I just wanted to share that with all of you. I hope that you were able to find some sort of inspiration in that and reflection in that in this time of a lot of uncertainty. There's always a metamorphosis that we're going through, there's always a change that's happening, but all of it has purpose so that we can really step into our truest selves and be who we are truly meant to be. May you find courage in this time. May you find growth. May you find inspiration. Much love to you. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful, amazing day. Thanks for watching. Have a beautiful, amazing, fabulous, wonderful, joy filled day. I appreciate you, and I hope that you got something very valuable from this story. Have a beautiful day. Bye.